One of the biggest complaints that I regularly hear about Windows 11 is all the crap that it comes with. And if you remove it, it just adds it back the next time you run Windows Update. Well, today, I'm going to show you how to deal with that. Stay tuned. Right around the release of Windows 8, Microsoft transitioned themselves from a software company to an advertising company. They essentially transitioned into the same business plan that Google and many other tech companies use. Instead of monetizing Windows based on licenses like they had done for years, they now monetize Windows through the use of telemetry that ultimately leads to targeting advertising. All we really want is the Windows operating system to simply be an operating system without the colossal pile of junk that we currently have to deal with. Well, today, I'm going to show you an extremely easy method to do that, and also this method will help you keep it that way. But first, I got to pay some bills, so check out today's sponsor. Are you still running Windows 11 unactivated because the license just costs too much? Then you should check out today's sponsor, VIP-SCDKey, where you can get a valid Windows 11 license for around $20. Stop dealing with that stupid watermark and actually be able to change your desktop background with a valid license for Windows 11. Just go to the link in the description below and pick up a valid Windows 11 license key. During checkout, use the code CyberCPU for a 25% discount. Once you have your key, go to your activation settings in Windows 11 and click the link that says Change Product Key. Enter the product key you just purchased and hit Activate. Now you don't have to deal with that stupid watermark. And check out the description for deals on not just Windows, but Office too. Now, on with the video. Now, I don't know for sure why Microsoft transitioned into an advertising company, but I do kind of have my suspicions. Let's go ahead and put our conspiracy theory hats on for a second. What I'm about to say is completely a product of my own imagination, and it's just my personal theory. But I think it's kind of a pretty sound theory. I think Microsoft got sick of dealing with piracy. If you look at each version of Windows up to Windows 7, Microsoft has come up with a new and extravagant way of trying to stop software piracy. Yet, today, I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure you can activate Windows 7, 8, 10, and 11 with a Windows 7 product key, or at least with the same product keys for all those operating systems. I might be wrong about Windows 8, but I think you can. Let me know in the comments below if I'm right about that. In all fairness, I haven't installed Windows 8 many times. It was such a disaster of an operating system that I can count on one hand the amount of times I actually installed it. But if you look at Microsoft today, they really don't care about piracy anymore. I mean, they let you use Windows 10 and Windows 11 without even activating it. In fact, the only benefit to activating Windows is you're able to change your personalization settings and a few other things. I think what happened is Microsoft decided instead of fighting with pirates, they would just monetize Windows in a different way. And that way, they were even monetizing the people who were stealing the operating system. It's kind of brilliant if you think about it. And considering Microsoft's current market cap, it was apparently effective too. But unfortunately though, the side effects to this is that we have a bunch of garbage that comes pre-installed with Windows. And it's kind of gotten worse over time. And it's also not just bloat in Windows that's an issue. It's also the telemetry that Microsoft collects on you through Windows. In fact, we don't even know for sure how much data they collect on us to begin with. And with Microsoft's strong push into AI, we're potentially leasing our hardware to Microsoft to power the world's biggest surveillance botnet. And you know, here's the thing. Microsoft wonders why we have such an issue with recall. It's not our desire to not be able to search for what we've done in the past. It's our distrust in what Microsoft does with the information that Windows collects. So, for that reason, we turn it off and we debloat the operating system to give us more of a semblance of privacy, something we haven't truly enjoyed since Windows 7. And ultimately, Windows 7 is an old game that you remember fondly until you replay it 20 years later and realize it's nowhere near as great as you remember. The nostalgia is why people still love it. But We don't have to sacrifice an insecure and outdated operating system in order to get that nostalgia back. We can do it now with Windows 11 by making it just a little bit more private. And let me show you how. Okay, so here we are in Windows 11, and what I'm going to show you today will also work in Windows 10, but it's not quite as effective. The program that we're going to be using was made primarily for Windows 11, but it does support Windows 10, so you can use it, but I don't think it works as well in Windows 10. At least I haven't tested it, but the program that we're going to be using is called Crap Fixer. And this is essentially a program that just disables stuff from within Windows and uses it in kind of a wizard sense. So it's essentially just a list of things that we disable. However, it's got a few features that I think is going to help keep a computer debloated. And that's what we're going to get into. So the first thing we're going to have to do is download it. So I'll go ahead and leave a link to this in the description below. But first, we're going to go ahead and click on this link. And it looks like it updated 6 hours ago, which means all the notes that I wrote for it the other day when I did the research for this video aren't going to be valid, but that's okay. We're going to stumble through it anyway. So we're going to go down here and we're going to download this exe right here called CFixer exe. We're going to go ahead and click on it, and it's going to take a second to download, and we're going to go ahead and open it up in our downloads directory. And at this point, we can go ahead and close our browser. Now, to start the program itself, we just go ahead and right click and run it as an administrator. Now, you can run this as a regular user, but most of the features that it comes with aren't going to function correctly. So I would recommend running it as an administrator. And then, of course, since it's an unsigned executable that you downloaded off of GitHub, you've got to go ahead and hit run anyway in that little Windows warning window. And then for the user account control, go ahead and hit yes. And then here's the program right here. And then once the program starts, you'll notice that it's broken up into several different categories here. And we're going to actually go through those categories. So the first one that we're looking at is issues right here. And this gives you a couple of different things. It has the app widget updates as well as basic disk cleanup. And now the disk cleanup, this is just your regular disk cleanup. And what this does is when you go to run the program, it will run these things here after it goes through its regular scripts. If you want to know what each thing does, what you can do is right click on it and you can hit help or press F1 with it highlighted, and it'll tell you what it's doing. Like for instance, app widget updates automatically searches for available app updates using the Windows Packet Manager winget. Essentially what this is all of your Windows apps, like the solitaire and casual games, your TikTok, your Prime Video, your Instagram, Xbox, Disney Plus, all of these apps that you would normally get from the Microsoft Store. What this does right here is it goes ahead and checks for updates for all of those apps. Now, we're also going to show you how to remove those apps a little later in the video. But right here, if you ever have a question about any of these things on this list, you can actually go to the help and it'll describe what it's doing for you. Now, once you hit OK, it'll ask you if you want to go online to get even more information about each individual topic. So if you push yes, it will open up a browser window and it will show you even more information about the command that it's actually using to do whatever it is that it wants to do. So that gives you a lot of kind of power to go through and be able to figure out what all this is, so you're not just checking stuff that you don't understand. Now on this one right here, I'm going to go ahead and uncheck both of these right here because I don't want to run cleanup and I don't want to run the updates for the apps because I'm probably going to remove most of them anyway. But now we're going to move on to the system section right here. And the first one right here is show BSOD details instead of the sad smiley. Now what this is right here, obviously, is this kind of goes back to the more traditional blue screens that gives you a lot more information. Now you can check this if you want, or if you like the sad smiley, you can uncheck it as well. And then moving on, the next setting is enable Verbose login status messages. Now essentially what this does is by checking this, that little spinning wheel that you see when Windows is booting up, underneath that wheel, it will actually show you every specific thing that it's doing at the time that it's doing it. So if you ever have any problems or the Windows is booting up slowly or it's freezing up during boot, this will kind of help you to determine what's causing that to happen. And then if we move on to speed up shutdown time, what this does right here is it lessens the wait to kill service timeout to make Windows tasks close faster. So essentially when Windows goes to shut down, it tells the tasks that Windows is shutting down. And it gives them a little bit of time to shut down by themselves before it just crashes the different tasks. And in this case right here, what this does is it shortens that amount of time. So if a task doesn't close down timely, Windows just closes it and then moves on and then shuts Windows down. So this will speed up the shutdown time of Windows. And then this next one right here, the disable network throttling. Now, this may sound like something that you would definitely want to disable. However, I would be a little careful with this setting right here. This could affect network speed if you have an app that's hogging network resources. This disables Windows' ability to handle those network resources. So it might be a good idea to leave this one right here unchecked. But you can go ahead and play around with it, because luckily with this program, you can enable and disable stuff as much as you want. And then this next setting right here where it says the optimize system responsiveness, essentially what this does is it prioritizes foreground tasks to improve systems performance. And then the next setting says speed up the menu delay. So when you click on a menu item in Windows, like the start menu, there's a delay that in the amount of time it takes for that window to open. Same thing for a right-click menu, is it gives you a delay between when this actually opens to kind of make it look more sleek. Well, if you check this right here, what it'll do is it will lower that menu delay to make menus kind of appear faster. So instead of having the animation that goes up and you have the delay while the animation's playing, it just appears a lot faster. So it kind of makes Windows feel a lot faster. Then this next one right here, of course, is a new one that's been added since I wrote my notes. So I don't have any notes on it. But if you hit F1, essentially what this is, this is the end task in the Windows 11 taskbar in the context menu. So it'll add end task in here right here, which honestly is kind of a good hack. I would recommend enabling this one as well. So if we scroll down in the next section, we have MS Edge. And here we have disable browser sign-in and sync services. And essentially all this does is it disables the browser's ability to synchronize with your Microsoft account. And then the next one, don't show sponsored links in tabbed pages. That's a pretty obvious one to disable. Then we got disable Microsoft Edge as default browser. Now this one right here is a brand new one since I did my research on this app. But if we go into help, essentially what this does is it forces Edge to stop asking to change your default browser, which honestly, I think that's a really good one to keep checked. And then right here, this disable access to collections feature. Now, this one right here was kind of a little bit unusual because I don't know if this setting turns it on or turns it off. If you right click and go to help, it says this enables users to access the collections feature, allowing them to gather, organize, share, and export content more efficiently with Office integration. Okay, so why does it say disable access to collection feature as a title, but in the help, it says enables users to access the collection feature? So honestly, I don't know. So this setting may disable collections feature or it may disable it. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you know. Then disable the shopping assistant. This one's a pretty no-brainer. I would go ahead and check. Don't show the first run experience, which this is right here is when you open Windows Edge for the first time, it goes ahead and it makes you answer all these stupid questions, and this will essentially disable that so you don't have to deal with it. And then disable gamer mode. Gamer mode allows people to give Edge a kind of a gaming theme, and it adds other settings for gaming. So you can disable gamer mode just by checking this box right here. And you can also disable the Copilot symbol within Edge. Now, I think this is a really good setting because if you open up Edge, as you can see, we have this little Copilot symbol right here. What this does is it disables that so you don't have the Copilot symbol within Edge anymore. And then right here it says don't allow import of data from other browsers on each launch. Now, I'm assuming this one right here, we can go to the settings right here, but it says allow import of data from other browsers on Microsoft Edge launch. Now, here's another one, because this says don't allow to import data, but this says allow import of data. So again, I have no idea. So this either disables importing of data from other browsers or enables it. Your guess is as good as mine. But if we move on to disable Start Boost, what Start Boost is in Windows Edge, most of the program is actually loaded into memory as Windows boots, so that when you actually go to click Edge, so if I go over here and I click Edge, it just blasts open real quick. Because honestly, Edge was running in the background anyway, it just wasn't running. It was just, most of the program was running in memory and it was just taking up resources while it was waiting for you to start Edge. Now, I would recommend disabling the Start Boost because of the fact that it just takes up resources. And if you're not using Edge anyway, then it's a good thing to disable that. And then right here, don't show quick links in new tab. You can either enable or disable this by checking this box. And then don't submit user feedback option. You can also disable that right here. Now, most of what I gathered from this section, I had to Google while writing this video because I don't use Microsoft Edge. I'm not familiar with a lot of these features. So in some of these settings, it may or may not make more sense to you than it does to me if you use Edge. But if you're like me and you don't use Edge, and you're kind of confused at some of these settings, then honestly, it really doesn't matter. Because if you don't use Edge, it really doesn't matter what you enable or disable from it. However, disabling the fast startup of Edge might benefit you because if you don't use it, there's no reason to have it running in the background all the time. But let's get back to it. Okay, so the next section we're going to go into is UI. And when we go through here, this is essentially UI is the user interface. So these are more tweaks when it comes to how Windows itself operates. So the first one is show full context menus in Windows 11. Now, if you know me, you know that I'm a big fan of the full context menus and that I absolutely despise the new Windows 11 context menu. That's essentially this menu right here. And the full context menu is this one right here, the old-fashioned kind that comes with literally every version of Windows up until Windows 11. But by checking this right here, it will go ahead and convert you back to using the full context menus all the time. Now, I've also noticed that recently, and this may be something that's specific to 24H2, but I've noticed that in a lot of cases now, when you hit your right-click button over an icon, it doesn't necessarily give you the settings for that icon anymore. Sometimes you have to hit it a couple times over the same icon in order for it to actually give you the settings for that icon. And to be honest with you, it drives me crazy when I'm in a hurry. But the next thing we're looking at is don't use personalized lock screen. And essentially what this is once you lock Windows, it has a clock and it has a whole bunch of information on it, and you have to actually hit enter in order to get to the login screen. And that's essentially all that is. So if you check this, it will no longer use that personalized lock screen, and it will just sit on the login screen if you're logged out. And then this one is the hide the search bar on the taskbar. And that's, of course, this search bar right here. And then right here is hide most used apps in the start menu. And what that essentially is if you go ahead and click start, that's in this recommended area right here. Sometimes it will show apps. So if you have apps that you use a lot, it will go ahead and show them right in this list right here. And if you want to disable that functionality, you can go ahead and do that right here. You can also hide the task view button on the taskbar. And that's this button right here that opens up your different desktops. And if you want that gone, you just go ahead and check it right here. You can also disable search box suggestions. And what that is when you click the start menu and you type, like if we were to type CyberCPU, as you can see, what it's going to do is it's going to use Bing to search for CyberCPU. And of course, this is all some really great content, but you may not want to search the internet when you're searching for something on your computer. So essentially what this does right here is by checking the disable search box suggestions, it disables Bing search from your start menu. So that functionality won't work anymore. And then right here, pin more apps to start menu. Essentially all that does is it allows more apps and less recommended. This is a setting that you can change within settings. However, this just gives you a way to change it in a more convenient way. And then, of course, align start button to the left. That moves all your icons in your start button over here to the left. And you can also disable the transparency effects, which that is essentially when you click the start button. If you can see, I don't know if this comes out good on the video, but there's just barely a slight difference in coloration between right here where you can kind of see there's a slight transparency within the windows. And all this does is disable that. Now, you can also enable dark mode for apps, which is the programs themselves, like your actual program. And you can also enable dark menu for system. That's going to be your taskbar, your start menu, and all the things associated with Windows that aren't applications. And then finally, you can disable the snap assist flyout. And what that is essentially when you put your mouse over here, it's all of the stuff that comes up, as well as I believe this up at the top right here. But I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure it's this as well as this. But let me know in the comments if I'm right about that. And then the next section we're looking at is gaming. And this one just has a couple of settings in it. The first one is disable the game DVR. It's the full screen recording and different optimizations that the game bar provides. By checking this, it disables that. You can also disable power throttling, which essentially disables Windows' ability to throttle the CPU to save power. This might be a good idea to disable, or it might not. It just depends on what you use your computer for. But you can also disable visual effects, which visual effects would be anything. Like, for instance, when you click on an icon, how the icon kind of has an animation when it maximizes and minimizes, when your start menu slides up, when your other menu items slide around. All this does is disable all of those little animations. This is something that was really popular back in like the Windows XP and the Windows 7 days. Personally, I don't like it. I like to leave this unchecked because personally, I kind of like the animations. I want Windows to look pretty. But you guys can do that. If you have a lower powered computer, it might be a good idea to disable that. And it might be a good idea also to not disable power throttling. So that's one that I would uncheck also. So to this point, we've pretty much been playing with UI tweaks and haven't really spent a lot of time on privacy. While many of the settings we just went through are really popular settings to change in Windows 11, they're not really the reason why people get angry with Windows 11. Well, some of them are, of course, but for the most part, we need to dig into privacy settings, and that's where most people get upset. But it's still nice to have some of these UI settings right here in an easy-to-use UI. But let's move on to the privacy settings now. Okay, so in privacy, there's really not a lot of stuff in here, but there's several different sections. As you can see, the next section is ads, and of course that falls into privacy as well. But the first one is going to be disable activity history. And this essentially just disables Windows' ability to track your activity, like app uses, searches, and other things like that, other activities like that. Then the next thing is disabling location tracking, which that's a pretty no-brainer right there. It prevents Windows from tracking your location. And then disable the privacy settings experience at sign-in. And essentially what this one is right here is this is that privacy screen that you get after running Windows updates. And it asks you if you want to turn these different settings on, settings that you already have turned off, by the way. All this does is disable that screen from ever coming up, so it should keep your old settings intact. And then the next one is turning off the telemetry and data collection. Now, this one right here, I'm not quite sure. I'm assuming what they're doing here, and if we hit yes, we can kind of see is, yeah, they're essentially disabling this in the registry right here. So in order to do that, I'm pretty sure you can only do that with Windows Professional and higher. I don't think this setting works with Windows Home. But if you're using Windows Home, go ahead and check it and see if it turns off. Essentially what this is if you go down into privacy and security and then diagnostics and feedback, it's this section right here. And all this is doing is turning this section right here off, so it's no longer sending diagnostics and feedback or telemetry by another name back to Microsoft. And then the next section right here is for ads. Now this disables ads in File Explorer, which technically I don't think File Explorer currently has ads enabled, but I do think there's a registry setting to disable it just in case Microsoft decides to turn it on in the future. This will set that registry setting. You can also disable the finished setup ads, disable the lock screen tips and ads. You can disable personalized ads. You can disable the settings ads. You can also disable the start menu ads, which essentially start menu ads would be all the recommended programs and stuff like that that you can kind of see. You can disable the tailored experiences, which essentially what this is Microsoft using what it's collected on you to service you customized ads. You can disable general tips and ads, and you can disable the welcome experience ads. And then finally, down here at the bottom, we have AI. We have don't show Copilot in taskbar, which that's going to be this one right here. And we also have turn off recall in Windows 11, which both are pretty necessary to turn on, I think, personally. Now, this app also supports plugins, which we're not going to get into today. However, it allows you to create your own custom PowerShell scripts that you can include in the program on your thumb drive, or you can to kind of perform custom tasks that you may want to perform with this program. So if there's certain things that this doesn't disable, you can write your own script to disable it for you. Now, when I originally wrote this video, there was a simple pack of plugins on the download page on GitHub that you could download to check out. Unfortunately, though, they've now integrated that into the app, so everything about that has changed. It's one of the reasons why I'm really not going to get too much into it today. However, you can always grab one of those plugins in order to look at what they did in order to kind of write your own. But now that we've gone through the UI section and the privacy section of this app, Now, let's get to debloating Windows 11. Let's actually run the app and see how it runs. Okay, so once you go through and you select all the things that you want to select inside this app, you just run CF Fixer, and it does everything you want it to do. And it's essentially that quick. And if you go down into options and into settings, right here it says save settings to an INI file. Now, by checking that right here, this wasn't a setting back when I originally did this video. However, it is one now. But luckily, all of this, the changes that you made, all the things that you checked and all the things that you unchecked are now saved in an INI file. So if you go back into here, you can see that Crap Fixer now has its own INI file that it can use to save all of these settings. So in the event that you want to come back to it later, which you may have to do after Windows updates, essentially all you have to do at that point is run the program itself as administrator, hit yes, and then everything that you had checked before should remain the same. And then all you got to do is run the program. So after you run Windows Update, all you got to do is run this program again, and it changes all the settings that Windows may have changed for you back again. Now, with that said though, we also have this section right here called apps. It tells us that we haven't ran the analyze yet. So we have to run the analyze to get to this point. And what this does is it goes through and it shows you all the different apps that are on the system. So what you can do is just decide which ones you don't want to be on there. So if we go Bing News, Bing Weather, Copilot for sure, Get Help, sure, why not get rid of that? And you know what, why is, okay, there we go. For some reason, Copilot wasn't allowing me to check it. It's almost like the computer is coming alive and trying to protect itself. Anyway, Microsoft 3D Viewer, that one I actually use occasionally. Microsoft Office Hub, yep, we're gonna check that. Solitaire Collection, I'm gonna keep that. Sticky Notes, I'm gonna go ahead and keep that. OneNote, we'll get rid of OneNote. Skype, we'll get rid of. So essentially, all I'm doing here is I'm going through and I'm checking stuff that I don't want anymore. So I can go ahead and check these in order to shut them off. The Windows camera, I'm going to go ahead and keep that. The Windows Feature Hub feedback, going to get rid of that. Maps, get rid of that. Your phone, Zune Music, video, and there we go. So I checked most of those things, and then all you got to do is run CF Fixer, and it will remove all those apps from the system. And as you can see, now we're down to just the 4 that's left. Now, in the event that all this is great, you went ahead and run this and you're happy with Windows, but let's say you have a problem. And this is one of the reasons why I don't like programs like this, and I typically don't recommend them. The reason I'm making an exception with this specific program here is because it has this specific feature. Now, if we go to downloads and we go ahead and run this program again, let's say you have major issues that are caused by one of the settings on this list. You just don't know which setting it is. Luckily, what you have is this little button right here called Restore. So if you click that button, it'll ask you if you want to restore all the selected features to their original state. If you hit yes, then it changes everything back. The only thing I don't believe it does, and if we hit Analyze, as you can see, it doesn't actually install the apps that you've removed. But usually that's going to be okay. Normally what's going to happen is it's one of these settings right here that you set that usually causes problems. And with that, it's nice to be able to restore it. And then you can try again, go through and try not checking speed up shutdown time or not changing the BSOD details. You'll have to try to figure out which process was causing the problem, but luckily you can go ahead and enable and disable things on the fly using this program. That's one of the reasons why I like it. I think it works really well. Now, at this point, I just want to point out that this app is only a few weeks old, and it's also in active development. So I'm sure more features are going to be added to this app moving forward. In fact, already features have been added since I wrote the video originally. So you may want to bookmark the GitHub page to check every once in a while to see if there's new updates for this program. But you know what? If you've gone this far and done everything with this app does, and you're still not happy with Windows 11, then check out this video where I show you how to turn Windows 11 into Windows 10. At least make it look like Windows 10. I guess in some cases, that's better than nothing. But as always, you guys have a great day.